today's going to be a fun one because we're diving into my favorite topic, video content. And to be successful with video content, you need to have, a strategy behind you, right? And you need to be able to create content in certain formats and topics and all that. But my guest today has been told that his content strategy, he's been doing everything wrong, and yet his content blows up. His videos are overperforming. And I want to kind of dissect, what is his strategy, if at all? How does he think about video content, and why he thinks the videos perform well? And a large part of that, I think, is his approach to storytelling. My guest today, Neal Foard, the principal and founder of Storyfire.net. So, Neal, welcome to the show.
Dave, thank you for having me. But what your audience doesn't know is that you and I had a long conversation before we were on this call, and it was a gasp because, for the benefit of your audience, Dave is one of these people where you speak to him for 5 minutes, you feel like you've known him for 10 years. So it really is fun to be on with you.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I did not pay him to say that. Or to say
No, he did not.
I didn't pay him much to say that, we'll say. So cool. Yeah, Neal, why don't you kind of give us a little bit of a backstory, Storyfire, kind of explain what we got going on there, and who does that help and benefit?
Yeah, so I came from a background in advertising. I had been on the creative side of the business for about 25 years. And what happens with creative people is that they think that when they come up with a concept, that it will sell itself on its own merits. That people can spot a good idea when they see it, which of course is not true, because if people could spot a good idea when they saw it, we would all be running movie studios. But the fact is that nobody knows anything. So what happened to me at the large agencies that I used to be at is that I developed a knack and a kind of program for how to sell creative work to clients. And it's the blocking and tackling and the subtle finer points of helping persuade people that what you're trying to convince them to buy will work. And from that, I did thousands and thousands of presentations. And over the course of those, it was very much like a stand-up comedian doing night after night after night. They kind of get a knack for it. They figure out how the jokes are supposed to land and what's good timing and so forth. Well, that's what I did. So I put it together in a program, and it's multiple hours of videos in little 6-minute, 5-minute bite-sized chunks. And it's the encapsulated experience of 30 years of selling things through storytelling. And just to kind of cement the idea of why is storytelling important? Why does that seem to be such a big buzzword now? Well, it's because of this foundational truth. And that is, you can put a bunch of bullet points in front of somebody. You can give them long lists of things, and they won't remember them. And the longer the list, the less they'll remember. But what you'll notice, and this is true of you and me, which is you probably haven't heard the story of the tortoise and the hare in 15 or 20 years. And you can not only remember it, you can tell it back to me with pretty good fidelity. You'll certainly remember the moral, which was the whole point of it. And whether it's parables in the Bible or mythologies, or whether it's, neat little stories by Aesop, little fables, this is the operating system of human beings. This is how we remember things. This is how we can repeat them. And if there's anything that I learned about selling ideas to people, it's that you've got to give them something they can repeat. Not just remember, but repeat. So that is what I'm doing these days. Dave, how's that for an explanation?
Love it. I thank you for being concise with it too, because sometimes people will speak for hours on that one topic. So storytelling requirement in order to help your message become sticky in people's brains. How do we do that, right? Because I think there's people who are good at storytelling and people who just have a knack for it. Like I see some Matthew McConaughey clips of him on podcasts, and I swear that man is just an orator. Like, he knows how to tell a great story.
Yeah, he's got a knack. Also, his delivery it helps
Right.
advance the ball. It's not just what he says. He's a charming guy and thoughtful, and he's sincere. And whether you agree with him on or not on any of his podcast points, he's very charming. There's no doubt about it. It doesn't hurt that he's good looking.
Yeah, that's why people stick around. Huh?
Helps.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, good for
right.
him. All right, so step one in storytelling is become good looking. But no, if you yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
if you're
excellent.
if you're telling stories,
Yeah.
you know, people talk about the hook of content and such to get people
Yeah.
into to emotionally care about what you're going on. So, what are the kind of the beats of a story that we can incorporate into our content, into our messaging that will actually have people care about what we're saying?
Yeah. So right now in 2025, there is a problem with people's attention because of things like TikTok and other social media. It causes us to scroll, and this affects our dopamine centers, and we become incredibly impatient to get to the point. And as a result of this impatience, it becomes really, really important for us to hold somebody's attention and actually let them know how long it's going to take before you get to the finish line. I'll give you a sense of what I'm talking about. I used to work for the CFO of a very large advertising agency. His name was Bill Cochran. Very charming man, but he was the CFO, so he knew everybody's secrets. Because in the end, everybody's got to pay their bills, and the way they pay their bills turns out to be incredibly revealing. So Bill knew everything about everyone, and his day was booked in 15-minute increments. You couldn't get on Bill's calendar for an hour. That was not going to happen. Well, Bill was, despite being very charming and incredibly savvy and smart, he also, was impatient for you to get to the point. So I learned that when I was going to go in and speak to him, I had to tell him how long it was going to take. So I would walk in and I would say, Bill, this is going to take 2.5 minutes. I'm going to describe the situation I'm facing. I'm going to ask you for an approval or a not approval on this piece of software I want to acquire. If you give me an approval, it will take me 3 weeks to integrate and probably we'll get our money back on it in about a quarter. So I will leave 3.5 minutes in my time for questions. Now, here's what blah, blah, blah. When he knows it's going to take 2.5 minutes for me to get the story out, he will sit patiently for 2.5 minutes. If he doesn't know how long this is going to ramble on, after 60 seconds, he's already looking at his watch and sending the signal to his EA to interrupt. You've got to give people a sense. So, for example, at the beginning of a story, I will often say something like, it is my belief that minor league baseball is better than the majors. Let me explain. Okay. Now, what I'm about to do is explain what I've just proposed. Or I'll say something like, have you ever noticed blah, blah, blah? And it'll be some contradiction or some insight or some provocative idea. You want to give somebody a sense of what the payoff is going to be if they stick around long enough for the punchline. And I will often, in my videos, I will have a title and it will say something like marriage and timing, right? Or it'll say the benefits of a sunny disposition or the physics of a sunny disposition. And that's the hook in a way. They want to find out what the significance of the title is. And I didn't used to do that. I learned to do that when you give them a sense that this is a story about this topic, it's a little bit like slide support in a meeting. It helps reinforce what it's about.
Well, I think
So,
another to jump in there too. I think
yeah,
having
please.
what they call is the visual hook. So you have your audible hook was you saying that point in the beginning of the video, but then the visual hook is that text that you have there. Sometimes also
Yeah.
accompanied by a graphic, but that's also because a lot of times people are scrolling, um, and videos are muted by default in the feed, so they're not
Yeah.
hearing what
Right.
you say
On
in the beginning.
Instagram, for
So that
example.
visual
Yeah.
hook is just as important.
Yeah, that's a point. And now you may have noticed from my own videos, I'm not a big deal on TikTok or Instagram or anything like
Don't
that.
sell yourself
I've
short.
got about I've got about 400,000 followers on TikTok, which is not, that doesn't qualify for any awards. What it does do though is for the people that follow me, I'm a brand. And this is kind of for the benefit of your audience. The beauty of being a brand is that you've set an expectation and they come to you for a certain kind of output, a certain kind of, like, for example, uh, I like to tell very personal stories about my own personal life, but, and we can get into this a little bit later, I'm never the hero of these stories because I'm not a hero in my own life. What I am is I watch other people and I admire other people. And I think there's something to be learned from that. And as I was telling your guest before, I enjoy talking to you because you're a curious person, Dave. I mean, that's why you have a podcast, is because you like to learn from other people. The benefit of that for your guests is that you get to ask the questions for them. You get to say what they would have said. And it's a really nice thing to be able to go to your podcast and they get fed curiosity, openness, new ideas. See how great that is to have that as a brand? You know, it's going to be helpful when I go to your podcast. I know I'm going to learn something.
Right.
That's a great brand to have. And I doubt very seriously that you ever present yourself to the world like, I am so wonderful. And you know how that's a kind of a disease in social media where you'll get some bro who will be out there saying, like, I managed to squeeze 64 hours out of a day. That kind of dude.
Right. Right. Here's my morning
Right.
routine that makes me $10 million by breakfast. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. First of all, bro, you're lying. Okay. Second, get over yourself.
And to that point, real quick, to double down on that, I do think that people, the word of the century right now is authenticity, but I think that's maybe where I hate that word, but I think it plays in that arena of like,
yeah,
when you just come natural, like you're not thinking, you're not performing, you're not trying to be something. It's just your natural state of I'm inquisitive, and people respect that and value that about me, versus if I'm trying to present myself as an authority, that's me performing in an attempt to try to win you over, and that people can feel that friction. I think that's just kind of what that whole thing is.
I do think that there's a tremendous role in 2025 for us to have people that we can think of as friends. I think that if you were to look at Joe Rogan, whatever you think of Joe, politically, you have to admit he's a curious person and he wants to know. And it was that attitude, I believe, that won him his followers, which is he was curious. And I don't remember ever him bragging about himself. Do you ever remember that? I don't.
I think he'll maybe say some things about his like UFC abilities and stuff like that, but yeah, he's never braggadocious by any means. He's just very curious about his guests and complimentary of his guests.
So the reason I keep leaning on this topic and calling out people for this quality is that for the benefit of your listeners, when they're telling a story, you should never cast yourself as the hero of the story. There's you forgive me, I've repeated this on other podcasts. I'm going to do it again. There's a quote from George Orwell that I find incredibly insightful, which is, no autobiography is to be trusted unless it reveals something disgraceful. Since any man who gives a good account of himself is likely to be lying, for when you look at any life from the inside, it's just a series of defeats. And the truth of that is, if you're crowing about your greatness, you are either deluded or mentally ill or incredibly insecure. And people don't look at you the way you think they look at you. When you start bragging about yourself and telling us all how wonderful you are, you think we're looking up at you in admiration. We're not. We're looking at you with a snarl on our face in the profound hope you get punched in the neck by someone. We really cannot wait for your demise.
Mm-hmm.
For example, there's this dude, I think his name's Johnny Somali or something like that. Are you familiar with this cat?
Johnny who?
Somebody Somali. He's a YouTuber who has made a career of annoying people. And he goes into foreign countries and he's just the most abrasive, gross, awful, despicable gadfly who spits on people's flags and, grinds against statues of, he's been arrested in Korea for a series of offenses, and he's facing what might be about 8 or 9 years in a Korean prison. When you read the comments, people are so giddy over this, and they are hoping for a 20-year sentence. Like, they don't just want him to go away. They want him to be symbolic of please end this nightmare. And the idea that You think, bro, that we are looking at you in admiration or that your clout means anything to us. It doesn't. You're going to be a blip, and you're going to have contributed nothing except by your demise. That will be the one positive outcome,
Right.
is your comeuppance. So we are a community. The world is a community of human beings who are all very insecure, frightened, and in need of love and friendship and belonging. If you're not contributing to that, if you are dividing people, if you are saying things deliberately to anger them, clickbait, rage bait, you're part of the problem. And the good news for somebody like you, Dave, is that a curious, open person who wants to help, who wants to contribute something, is that there's a thirst for it. There's a hunger for it. In an age of division, there's something really nice about somebody who's trying to vacuum up the accumulated tinder of unresolved anger, as
Love
opposed to
that line.
contribute more to it.
So how do you, I mean, you take the approach of, hey, I'm not the hero in this story, but we still want to be looked at as an authority. And we want, if you have you're a coach, high ticket coach, consultant, CMO, or fractional, you want to be paid a lot of money for what you know and what you can do, right? But we want to balance our approach, our public persona, our personal brand, to not be necessarily like, hey, look at me, look what I can do, because we
Yeah.
don't want to be off put, but we still need to put our best foot forward and say, hey, I am a smart person who's very capable. If you give me lots of money, I'll give you 10x that in return. So how do we thread that needle of creating content that isn't off-putting because it's us trying to be braggadocious, but yet we're still getting across the
Yeah.
value we can bring?
Authority and
Yeah.
yeah. Who wrote Never Split the Difference? Is it Chris Voss?
Yeah.
Is he the guy that wrote that?
Yep.
Okay, so Chris Voss did a really, really good explanation of this. I'm going to steal it. There had been an American overseas. I think he was in West Africa, and his son had been kidnapped. He goes to the consulate in the hope that the American embassy and those people can help secure the release of his son. The kidnappers are asking for some asinine figure, like $2 million, like he can cough up that kind of cash. And they call in Chris Voss. Now, this guy whose son has been kidnapped, as you can imagine, he's in a panic. He's emotionally, at his wit's end. And when they inform him at the consulate, we're going to, quote unquote, bring in the best there is. And then he discovers that by bring in, they mean he's on the phone. He's been very disappointed. And so he's thinking to himself, prove to me that you know what the hell you're doing. So he comes at Chris with like, who the hell are you and what makes you the expert here? Now, at this point, Chris might have gone into a description of his bona fides. He could say, I had this training and I've done this and so forth. But instead, he said, that would be a complete waste of time. I will never persuade this man that I have enough background in this. The only way to get through this situation is to begin immediately with the solution. So he says to this guy, okay, the good news is they've kidnapped your son on a Thursday. Let me tell you that when it comes to professional kidnappers, my experience is that most of them just want money for the weekend. So that tomorrow's Friday. If we can get them their money by Friday morning, or get them some money by Friday morning, they want to get rid of your son. They'll turn him over to you as long as you can cover their weekend. So here's what we're going to do. Bing, bang, boom. He says, we're going to give him money. Right off the bat, the father has turned from, who the hell are you, to, okay, let's just follow this solution, because that sounds like a good outcome, me getting my son back by Friday afternoon. In the same spirit, when you are an expert, don't bother convincing us you're an expert. Begin immediately with how this is going to help you and what you can do. So whether you are an insurance adjuster or you're a house flipper, people are not interested in you as much as they are in what you can contribute to their lives. It's Dale Carnegie. You can get anything you want as long as you're helping other people get what they want. And if they have any expertise or they're familiar with their problem, for you to begin immediately with a solution, they'll see the logic of it. They'll see the attraction of it. They'll go, is this new information? Does this help me? Is this insightful or is this novel? There's nothing quite like somebody who says, let me just present you with the problem that I think you're having and go immediately to how we might resolve this. One of the when I was in the advertising business, I was in business development a lot, which is we're trying to get new business. And you would get in front of clients, and the sin that all the advertising agencies would commit is talking about all the great work they'd done and how, all these award-winning creatives that we have for you, and this person was in charge of that. They spent the first 15 minutes talking about themselves. Good God, that was tiresome. Instead of saying, as we've looked into your situation, and I think there's something fascinating, an opportunity that you might not have thought of already. If you're interested, I'd like to describe to you the insight that we bring to this. Baby, they are 100% focused the same way that the father whose son has been kidnapped. We are now focused on that information. I am listening. Go, baby.
If I was to summarize, I guess between the Chris Voss example, the advertising example, not being braggadocious and all that kind of stuff, it's essentially comes down to making sure that they understand what's in it for me in your content as early as possible. And that's going to help at least keep them interested until the end. And you can maybe like sprinkle in some elements of like, oh, by the way, this is stuff I do for my clients. And that's kind of a small call to action. But the idea is like, what pain point do you have? And here's how to solve that. This is about you, not about how great I am.
Yeah, everybody's favorite subject is themselves. And we can't help it. Every time we look at a menu option or a certain kind of selection of cars and so forth, we can't help but picture it in our own lives. That's its relevance, is how does it fit into my life? If I bought these clothes, what would it say about me, etc. That's everybody operates like that. That's perfect. That's the human species. We're all trying to get ahead. We're all trying to find a mate. We're all trying to get rich and be secure, right?
Paid,
So
made, laid. Those are the three things.
that's good stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, and now let's return to why stories are effective in helping persuade people. It's because you can, as I was saying at the beginning, you can give them information, but it's often difficult to remember. If by contrast, you can illustrate your point with a very small story, and give them the moral in such a way that they can repeat it later, it's incredibly useful for contextualizing information. I had a guy he was a C-suite executive who was making a lot of presentations to prospects. He was in the oil and gas exploration business. They'd come up with a piece of software that was astonishingly good at shortening the amount of time it would take to make a conclusion on a piece of land as to whether it was going to be oil bearing. And on top of that, it was 40% more accurate about that prediction than other systems. So it was much quicker and it was more accurate. The story he chose to tell was to say, what we offer, I think, is such an incredible advantage. Let me describe the equivalent. My little girl, who was all of 5 years old, was having a birthday party. And the other members of the birthday, all the little invited girls were between the ages of 5 and 7. And everybody was playing pin the tail on the donkey, and my daughter went last. Well, as you can imagine, all the little girls, they get spun around, they have their blindfolds on, and they are putting the tails, the little tails. There are tails on the pool and tails on the walls, and there are little donkey tails on the cake. When it was my little girl's turn, all she did was she just lifted one eye of the blindfold and then walked and put it right on the donkey's butt. What we do is lift that blindfold off of you while the rest of the world is blinded. And all of a sudden, everybody leaves that meeting. Once you've then told the tale of how the technology works and what it can actually promise, they're able to go to their own teams and say, it's, how in a land of blind people, the one-eyed man is king. What we're going to be able to do is if we acquire this, we'll be not blind anymore. And to me, that's incredibly useful. That's incredibly good use of a story to make a point that can then subsequently be repeated, and they understand what you do. This is the power of storytelling versus we do 40% more accurate and 60% faster. Okay, I'm not sure they're going to even believe you. They have to kind of get emotionally invested at first. And you know, the beauty of the pulling the blindfold up is it says, I want to help you cheat. Fantastic.
You're gonna have a leg
I
up on the
like the
competition.
sound of that,
Yeah.
right? I've got an unfair advantage.
Yeah.
Tell me more. And but there are other reasons to tell stories, and they're often. I'll give you this sense of, in any meeting, what you want is an emotional connection with somebody. You want them to you want them to feel like they can trust you, and the way they're going to begin down that road of trust is feeling like there's a human being on the other side of this, and not a shark. Like there's somebody who understands that there's more to business, you know, than money. That all business is personal. And by the way, business that's personal is far more efficient than business that isn't. Because once you've established trust, we blow past all of that first tier of stuff, you know, all of the bona fides and making sure that the technology works the way you say it does. Once we've established trust, now we just you get repeat business. It's very efficient.
And referrals.
And referrals, which is even better, right? Because you know a cold call. Good Lord, how many cold calls do you have to make? What's the rate of success? 0.5%? Versus somebody's referred to you. They've already essentially decided they're interested. So now what's the success rate on referrals? I'll bet it's 80%.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you can establish a human connection, and when you do tell a story, stories tend to have this, what they call neural coupling, which is if I tell you a deeply affecting tale, by the time we get to the end of it, we are literally vibrating on the same frequency. We're experiencing the same emotional state. And that is a subconscious, and subconscious effects are the best because you don't even realize it's having the effect on you that it is. I'll give you an example of a subconscious effect. Dave, you probably have had the experience of smelling an aroma and going immediately to a memory.
Mothballs in grandma's closet.
Right? Or a certain kind of pancakes, or, you know, I remember there was my dad used to use Old Spice, you know, as an aftershave. And whenever I smell Old Spice, I immediately think of my father. The aroma sensors in the brain are closely linked to memory and to emotional impact. And there are some very good reasons for this that have to do with mates discerning their potential mates' immune system compatibility. So you can imagine it's like, have you ever been attracted to somebody that you're not, you know, isn't good for you, and you can't even figure out why you're attracted to them? I'll bet you it's smell.
Interesting.
That was told to me, by the way, by a professor of anthropology.
Probably told you by a cologne company.
By the way, for your women listeners, this person also told me never use too much perfume because men equate that with rot. I mean, like when things are rotting in the jungle, they often smell sweet.
Oh. They're trying to mask something. Interesting.
Yeah, right. Anyway.
So I want to get into your video content because you've told me that everyone that goes and consumes your content goes, you're doing it all wrong. Here's what you need to do, A, B, C, D. And yet
Right.
clearly something's working. So if you had first of all, kind of walk us through, for those who haven't checked out your video content yet, walk us through your approach and mindset and the types of content that you like to create.
Okay. So if anybody wants to find me, by the way, in social media, I'm really easy to find because I'm the only one on earth that spells my name the way that I do. And it's pretty easy. Nealfoard, Neal Foard. If you look me up, you'll find me. So the content that I do, I'll start with the reason that people tell me I'm doing it all wrong, which is all of my videos is just me on a black background talking directly to camera for 2.5 minutes. And sometimes there's a title. That's about it. It is incredibly boring if you break it down that way. But the reason that I do it that way is because from long experience, if you get up in front of an audience and you put slides up, people are looking at the slides. They're not looking at you. And if you have a lot of text on them, they're reading the slides and they're not listening to you. So I deliberately put myself on the camera so the only thing you can look at is me. And part of the reason for that is that, and the black background, is it isolates you completely on what I'm saying. So then, in order to create any kind of theatrical experience, you imagine what I'm talking about. This is a very, very old technology. It's more than 60,000 years old. It's us sitting around a campfire and me describing, why the volcano gods are angry, or how we're going to kill the bison. The storytelling is a very, very old technology and one that we're all susceptible to. But if you put visuals, if you attach visuals to it, like everybody's telling me I should do, and those visuals are 1% off of what I'm describing, it creates a dissonance in your brain. It's very unsatisfying. And it provokes people to move on. Now, not everybody likes my videos. If you look at the analytics, I will lose 30% of the audience immediately because they don't like the way I look, or they don't, they're hoping for something more exciting. Like, everybody tells me I do my thumbnails wrong. they want me to do my thumbnails like everybody else does, which is these big bold colors, and there's like some expression like, ah, and then it says, 5 reasons why you're going to die if you don't read this.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
But I don't do that because my brand is not that. My brand is I just, from this thumbnail, it's going to be a dude talking to you about a story. And because there's nothing except me talking to you, I have to hold your interest exclusively by what the words are. So I get dramatic fall off. But the good news is, again, looking at my analytics, the 35% that manages to make it through the first 30 seconds, I keep them to the end. So if I get 100,000 views, 30,000 people have watched it all the way. And that means that the people that, follow me, they get what they get. They know what they're going to get. You know how some people don't, for years and years, Toyota Corollas, Toyota Camrys, they were just the most boring cars on the road. But baby, the people that liked Corollas and Camrys, they were in for life.
Mm-hmm.
Because what did the product promise? I promise you this product will work the way I says it will.
So you're disqualifying those who are just not interested in this format off the bat.
Yeah.
And this is probably, I'd imagine these are people who are stumbling upon your content for the first time, because if they already followed you, they would know that they're in for a treat and be okay with the format and stick around, versus probably, that drop off, that 70% are probably just new people that are like, this isn't what I want.
I'm not going to hold them anyway, because, the young people want to see young, sexy faces, and that's great. Come on. It's the Matthew McConaughey thing. He's just so damn good looking that people can't. They're just drawn to him.
Yeah.
But the good news for me is that despite the fact that I do that wrong, I do the thumbnails wrong, I do our visuals wrong, it's just me talking, is that by the time you get to the end of the videos, you feel like you kind of know me. And if there was anything that I learned from the advertising business, is that people fear the unknown and they glom towards what they're familiar with and what they're comfortable with. So I don't have 1 million followers, but the followers that I do have feel like I'm a friend. And that's what I want. I want the people that hire me for a speaking engagement or that hire me for coaching, I want them to be shocked by how much I am exactly like the guy telling the stories. That has happened to me, by the way, Dave, where they go, you're just like you are in the videos. Yeah. Yeah, that's me.
Oh, yeah.
That's what, yeah, I know, right? Otherwise, I'm the greatest actor of all time. People pull, I'm really a scumbag. But a brand, and this is your whole thing, a brand is a promise. I have affixed a brand to this because I've made you a promise. It's going to work the way you expect it to work. It's going to deliver the value you expect it to deliver. So my daughter is always on me about, you've got to shake it up. Dad, you just can't keep posting the same old crap. It's like, hey, my last video got 250,000 views. Come on, take it easy.
I'm a big advocate in, if it works, it works. You have a format that people enjoy, whether, if they're following you for that format, they enjoy it. And, can you kind of walk us through the process of creating these videos in terms of what type of effort you have to put into, because a lot of people are weary of getting into video content creation because, okay, equipment setup, lighting, what do I say, when do
Yeah,
I
yeah.
record? So like, how much effort do you actually put into the video?
So I keep a notebook, and in the notebook is, you know, all of the things that occur to me over the course of a day. That would be an interesting thing to tell. Usually, the best stories are something bad happened to me, and I learned from it. I got two flat tires, but by the time I was done with the experience, it turned out to be one of the greatest things that had happened to me that month. It's funny that way, but I think you will have a more satisfying life if every time you are confronted by a problem, you recognize that often you get laid off, or you break up with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, or there's a series of bad things that happen to you, and when you look back in retrospect in 3 months, you go, wow, that turned out to be the doorway to this other thing. That was I really grew from that. What I will do is, as I'm going through a day, I'll try a lot to notice what other people are experiencing. And, what is this waiter having to deal with? What does that meter maid what's the problem she's dealing with today? And oftentimes there's a lesson you can learn from how they either deal with it with, incredible equanimity, or I admire people that don't rise to the bait when they're being baited or insulted. This is a quality I admire because I don't have it in great quantities. And there's usually a story to how is it that you're able to tolerate this kind of abuse? And I always talk to Lyft drivers. I always ask them how they come to be in Nashville and, have they lived there their whole lives? Everybody's got a story. Everybody's walking around with some kind of tale about how they came to be where they are. So I find that a kind of endless source. But you have to be curious about other people's lives and experiences. You have to ask them to tell you. I told a story not too long ago about going to the National Speakers Association meeting in Scottsdale, Arizona, and being astonished that the 1,300 people in attendance were all extroverts. What was that like? Some people would think, oh my God, that would be a horror movie. No, no, no. Even I might have said that going in, and only to discover it was this astonishingly great experience. How much fun it was that everybody wanted to talk to you. You can't be lonely there.
Yeah.
It's like you really have to try to
There's no
be
hiding. There's no
depressed.
hiding in the corner.
People are just so friendly. Okay. And it's like they do this for a profession. You go, oh, wow. And when you get a critical mass of them, it's incredibly powerful. So that to me was an experience that was worthy of a story because it was such an unexpected thing. So that's another source of stories, is when something didn't go the way you thought it was going to go. And why didn't it? And what was the outcome? I will usually begin any kind of story by knowing what the moral is at the end. So that's where I will begin. What's the point of telling you this? What can you learn from listening to me tell this story? So I will usually have a little quote at the end of my story to put a button on what I thought the meaning of it all was. And that has been a great source of stories as well, because as I look up quotes, it reminds me of things that happened to me. Like you find a wonderful quote from a George Orwell or from a Voltaire or from Rumi, and then you explore their other poetry and you go, wow, that's incredible. I was going through some Charles Bukowski poetry, and it made me so curious about him. I've wound up doing like 3 stories just about Charles Bukowski's life and the effect that it's had on other people. So if you keep a notebook of all the things that happen to you personally, you'll find that the notebook fills rather quickly, and it gives you a lot of material to work with. The other thing that is a really great source of stories is the mashup. That is, how this reminds you of that, or this experience that you had and this experience that you had now help you triangulate on how you really feel about something. And right now, in an age of division, the stories that make me happiest are when people change their minds or rekindle an old friendship or overcome that division and have grace around things. To be the antidote to the division possibly is the highest. It's the highest ambition you can have in this year, in this context. Every once in a while, you'll run into a politician who's got a real knack for being accepting that not everybody's going to see the world his way. There's this guy up in Maine running for senator. I've never seen anyone with a more pure instinct for how politics ought to work. And he's very graceful and gracious with people that come at him. And what he always tries to do is find common ground as the starting point. And he's so deft at it. I pray he's successful, because I think this guy can be partly an antidote to the way that we conduct our political discourse these days. But anyway, to return to like, what's the source of stories? If you see a news item and it inspires you, or you run into a character and you find them admirable, that's a story worth telling. Why are you inspired by that? What are your values? Like, why did that touch your heart? And that expression of why that story, why that thing or that person was meaningful to you, that tells us everything about you. You know, who you found admirable. And when you describe it, like, what effect did it have on you and what did you learn from that? It's really, a good brand is to be an uplifting brand. Why I admire, Dave, your curiosity is that curiosity tends to uplift. Being open to new experiences and new ideas and new people, to not be judgmental, but rather try to figure something out. It's an uplifting attitude. And given a choice, I would rather spend my time with somebody who's uplifting than someone who isn't.
Right.
And I think that's particularly true of brands, is that when a brand, likes being alive, wants to help people, celebrates happiness, it becomes attractive the same way that a person who features those qualities is. It's one extra thing I wanted to say. Oh, which is to go back to the theme of everything as a mashup. Sometimes a story will sit in your book for months, and then you'll see some new story, and they actually complement one another. And I'm a great follower of other people who tell stories, because when somebody has a knack for it, what they demonstrate is how you and they can look at the same thing and they pull away from it an insight that you didn't see. And it's just glorious when you go, oh, wow, I didn't notice that.
There's a great Steve Jobs quote that, something I'm going to butcher it, but essentially the effect was that great artists feel bad about being kind of complimented on their work, because their work is typically the accumulation of their insights and experiences from other artists. They're kind of taking a little bit from this and that and putting their version and their spin on it. So they feel as though I don't deserve the praise because I'm standing on the backs of giants, type of thing. So yeah, I like that
Compare
idea.
that to AI, AI which scrapes and steals and mimics and produces as though it because it's a machine, and it has no conscience about stealing and repurposing. On LinkedIn, I had made a podcast appearance, and somebody who saw the podcast appearance then used AI to scrape the dialogue and did a post using a little carousel of slides that they thought were the useful bits of information from the podcast. So essentially, they just took the podcast and repurposed it as their own content. Now, God bless them, they mentioned that it was from the podcast that I was on. But when I looked at the quotes that they had pulled, they were mangled. Like they didn't get the part of the quote that was the important part. AI had scraped it like a machine, it was 60% right. And it really pissed me off to see this kind of botched, bite-sized, nutritionless, calories with no nutrition kind of thing. And I just thought, oh, this is where we're headed. Anything that I say now in the public sphere, somebody's going to think it's perfectly all right to have AI repackage it and then ship it under their own name.
Yeah, it's interesting. It kind of it's watering down the premise that you were trying to convey or the story you were trying to convey because AI doesn't understand like the essence of what you were trying to say, and so it just summarized it, and then this person just, I guess, copy pasted it into a post.
It wasn't even copy paste. It was because the post itself, if it had been copy paste, that would be one thing. But it was a bad reproduction.
Mm.
It was an incomplete reproduction, and it would be a little bit like I tell you the story of the Good Samaritan, and then somebody repeats the story of the Good Samaritan, and the conclusion is no good deed goes unpunished. Like, so, what?
A little whisper
That
down the lane.
that's not what. Yeah, that's not what I. Oh, good Lord. Oh, Lordy, this
Yeah.
is where we're at.
Well, Neil, this was awesome. If you were
Oh, are we
to,
done? That's no good.
we'll have a part two. We'll have to come back. We're reaching up,
Okay.
coming up on the hour.
All right.
But what I like to do is, if you have your audience in front of you, and we want to kind of put a bow on one key important thing that you want today's audience to walk away with from today's conversation, what would you tell them?
I want to return to the idea that storytelling is it's the operating system of human beings, that the species tends not to change at all. If you read a book from 1880 by Dostoevsky, you're going to see the same comedy of errors in the human species that we're experiencing now. People do not improve in the sense that we're not smarter than they were during his time. We are the same flawed species that is jealous and angry and insecure, but also inspired and generous and capable of great creativity. We are the same species. Things don't change. Things that haven't changed, you want to hang on to. And one of those is that storytelling is an opportunity for you to make a human connection in an age of AI impersonalization and slop. And even if this guy rips off the content of a podcast appearance that I made and posts it under his own name, it will not get up on stage and do it for him. That to practice the craft of storytelling and get better at it is incredibly useful in an age of video, where you can amplify your reach and reach people's hearts. And the one thing that a car dealer told me once I've never forgotten, which is when love is involved, money is no object. And to have an emotional connection with people, which you can do with stories and you can't do with bullet points, to have an emotional connection to people is an enormous business advantage.
Love that. I'm going to take that quote. I will give you all the credit for that, though. Neil, this was great.
Yeah.
If people want to learn more about,
Cares.
yeah, I'll make sure I don't just GPT it out of this episode as well. If people want to learn more about you and what you got going on, and they want to check out your videos, where should you send them?
Well, they can find me just by doing a quick Google search about me, and it'll take them to my video content. But I'm on YouTube, NealFoard. I'm also on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on, TikTok. I do have this course that I teach, which is quite good. Storyfire. They can find it at www.storyfire.net. And there's some nice freebie videos on there. If you visit the website, it's not just me trying to sell you the course. It's also interesting things like how to make a good wedding toast and stuff like that. And also, if they visit nealfoard.com, I'm putting together a show called Good Company, where we visit small businesses and talk to them about, what it means to operate in a town and for their customers and so forth. And we've heard some terrific stories about, small business is just such an amazing thing. When the bosses feel responsible for the people that work for them in the towns that they live in, and It's not just stock price. It really is a combined fate. That's part of a mission of mine, is to go and celebrate small businesses in America.
Love that. I'm gonna check that out. Neal, thank you so much for being on today's episode.
Hey, thank you for having me, Dave. You're a good dude.